Welcome back to Golden Heart Stories. Today's story takes place at the Ashwick Salvage Fields Scrapyard, Grayshore, USA. In a scrapyard where broken metal sang at night, a homeless girl built fragile chimes to survive. When a billionaire came to erase the land, he heard her sound. What followed was a fight for belonging where one child's voice would decide everything and change two lives forever that night. Before the city woke up, the scrapyard was already breathing. Metal slept in crooked piles. Bent doors leaned against broken engines. Rust flaked like old snow. And in the narrow space between two collapsed fences, a little girl stirred beneath a sheet of torn plastic and corrugated tin. Her name was Junie Vale. Junie woke before the wind did. She always did. Because if she woke too late, the yard would claim its sounds, first screaming iron dragging chains, the cough of trucks, and she liked to hear the quiet before it disappeared. She sat up slowly, careful not to knock over the small bundle beside her. Strings, wires, bent spoons, bottle caps. Her hands moved on instinct. She tied each piece together one by one, looping thin wire around cold metal. Her fingers were red and cracked, but she didn't stop. She never did. When the wind passed through the yard, the scraps answered, a soft, trembling sound, not loud, not proud, but alive. Junie closed her eyes. For a moment, the scrapyard didn't feel like a place where things were thrown away. It felt like something listening. She reached for a flashlight with one weak battery left. The beam flickered, barely holding on, but it was enough. She bent closer, tongue caught between her teeth, focusing as if the world depended on the next knot. Sometimes she nodded off like that, head falling forward. Chime ringing gently as her body shifted. When she woke again, startled, her first instinct was always the same. She tied the strings tighter, in case she had to leave. Junie pushed her cart toward the street before sunrise. Its wheels squealed in protest, metal grinding against metal like the yard itself didn't want to let her go. She apologized to it under her breath, as she always did. I'll be back. At the corner near the old market, she stopped and arranged her work. Wind chimes first, then the little whistles. Then the stars made from flattened bottle caps, their edges smoothed by hours of careful sanding with stone. She wiped each piece with her sleeve until it caught the light. People passed. Most didn't look down. One man stopped, picked up a chime, turned it once, twice. How much, he asked. Junie named a number too small to argue with. He frowned, paid it anyway, walked off without a word. Junie didn't watch him go. She was already counting what she'd earned, folding the bills, carefully sliding them into a sock she wore inside her jacket. She bought a stale bread roll from a vendor packing up early. Tore it cleanly in half. One half she ate slowly, chewing longer than necessary, letting the warmth last. The other half she wrapped in newspaper and tucked deep into her pocket. For tomorrow. A woman nearby watched her and whispered, "Poor thing." Junie heard it. She smiled anyway, because pity didn't buy food, and today she still had work to do. Junie had rules. She didn't write them down. She didn't need to. Rule 1, never ask for help. If you ask, you owe. Rule 2, never sleep too deeply. Deep sleep meant surprises. Rule 3, never believe you're staying. Back at the scrapyard, she collected wire and loose screws while the sun climbed higher. She avoided the center where the machines moved. She knew where not to step, where sharp edges hid where the ground gave way. She had learned fast. By afternoon, her bag was heavy. By evening, her shoulders burned. She sat beneath her tin shelter and worked again, shaping metal into something gentle, something that didn't hurt to touch. A chime slipped from her fingers and fell. The sound rang out clear, almost beautiful. Junie froze. For one terrifying second, she thought someone might hear it and come. No one did. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. As night crept in, headlights appeared at the far edge of the yard. Black cars. Clean. Wrong. Men in jackets stepped out, pointing, measuring, talking about space and value. Junie watched from the shadows, her hands tightening around a half-finished chime. She tied its string quickly, just in case. Night came softly to the scrapyard like a blanket that didn't quite fit. Junie waited until the last engine coughed itself quiet, until the men were gone, until the yard belonged to shadows again. Only then did she switch on her flashlight. 1 bar of battery, maybe less. She placed it carefully on a broken crate, angling the beam just right. Too bright, and someone might see. Too dim, and she'd cut herself again. Her hands worked without thinking. Wire bent. Metal kissed metal. A spoon handle became a stem. Bottle caps flattened into petals. Every movement was slow, economical, like she was afraid the night might run out before she finished. Her fingers split open where old cuts never healed. She noticed only when the metal slipped slick with red. Junie frowned at it, annoyed, not scared, and tore a strip from an old bandage she'd found weeks ago. She wrapped it tight, blew on her hands, kept going. The wind crept through the yard. A half-finished chime answered with a thin, trembling sound. Junie froze. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She listened. 1 second. 2. 3. Nothing. She exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging. The sound had only startled her because it was beautiful. Too beautiful for a place like this. Sometimes when she was very tired, she imagined the chimes were talking to each other, that they knew what it felt like to be made from pieces no one wanted. She finished tying the last string and lined the chimes together beside her. Before sleeping, she reached for the twine again and looped it around all of them, one bundle tight and ready, in case she had to leave fast. Junie lay back against the cold tin. The flashlight flickered once, then steadied. She didn't turn it off. Sleep came in short pieces. Each time she shifted, the chimes whispered. Each time she woke, hand reaching out instinctively to make sure they were still there. The next afternoon, the yard felt different. Cleaner shoes stepped where rust usually ruled. Voices carried confidence. Measuring tape snapped open like a challenge. Junie noticed them from far away. Black cars lined the edge of the scrapyard. Men in coats pointed, nodded, talked about space and clearance and timelines, words that didn't belong here. She stayed still. If you don't move, sometimes the world moves past you. One man didn't. Caldwell Rourke walked with his hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the piles like he was reading a map no one else could see. He'd been here for hours, already touring the land that would soon be his. Then the wind shifted. It threaded itself through a row of hanging metal near Junie's shelter. A single chime, unfinished, uneven, answered. Clear. Soft. Human. Caldwell stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Junie saw it and panicked. She yanked the chime down, hiding it behind her back like it was something stolen. Her pulse roared in her ears. He turned toward her. For a long second, neither of them spoke. She noticed his coat first. Thick. Clean. The kind that didn't smell like smoke or oil. Then his shoes. Leather, untouched by rust. He noticed her hands. Small. Wrapped. Red. What's that? He asked, nodding toward her back. Junie hesitated. Then slowly she brought the chime forward. I made it, she said quickly. It's clean. He reached out but stopped short, letting her decide. She placed it in his palm. The metal was cold. The sound when it moved was almost impossibly gentle. Caldwell felt something tighten in his chest. How much, he asked. Junie named a price so low it barely deserved to be called one. He didn't argue. He paid it. Then he looked at the rest of her cart. I'll take those too. Her eyes widened just a little. She gathered the chimes, careful handing them over one by one like they might break if she moved too fast. When he paid, she bowed her head. Thank you, she said. Then softer. Thank you for not paying extra. That stopped him again. The signs went up the next morning. Clearance notice. 7 days. Junie couldn't read all the words, but she didn't need to. The red stamp told her everything. 7 days meant the same thing it always meant. Pack light. Leave quiet. Don't look back. Dax Hollis, the foreman, read it aloud for the workers. His voice echoed through the metal piles. Junie listened from behind a stack of doors, fingers digging into her sleeves. 7 days. That night, she didn't set up her flashlight. She sat in the dark staring at the chimes she'd made, those she hadn't sold yet, those she'd planned to finish. One by one, she picked them up. Then she broke them. Not violently, carefully, like she was undoing something that never should have existed. Metal rang, then fell silent. "I'm sorry," she whispered to each piece. "I couldn't keep you." Her hands shook as she gathered the fragments. She didn't cry. Crying took time, and she needed all of it. When the last chime lay broken, Junie tied the pieces together with twine. The habit was automatic, secure, ready. She placed the bundle beside her bag. Just before dawn, headlights swept across the yard. Junie looked up. Caldwell Rourke stepped out of his car, and for the first time he saw what the notice had already taken. The scrapyard looked smaller when the machines stopped. Without the noise, the place felt exposed, like a secret someone had accidentally spoken out loud. Caldwell Rourke walked past the red notice nailed to a pole, its edges already curling. He saw Junie sitting where the ground dipped, surrounded by broken chimes tied together with twine. She didn't look up. He crouched a few feet away, careful not to spook her. The metal around them breathed in the wind. "Hey," he said gently. Junie's fingers tightened around the twine. She nodded once, still not meeting his eyes. "I came back," Caldwell said. "I wanted to see if you were all right." That word didn't fit. They both knew it. He glanced at the bundle beside her, the broken chimes, the habit of tying them together. It wasn't a choice. It was preparation. "Junie," he said slower now, "when this place closes, where will you go?" She answered immediately, "Somewhere that doesn't mind me." The sentence landed hard. Not dramatic, not angry, just practiced. Caldwell felt the answer in his chest, like a door shutting on a memory he hadn't opened in years. He searched her face for fear, for pleading for something he could fix quickly. There was none. She picked at the twine eyes on her hands. "I don't take much space," she added as if clarifying a misunderstanding. "And I clean." He swallowed. "You shouldn't have to think about that." Junie shrugged. "I always do." The wind moved again. A single unbroken chime rang faintly from somewhere behind them. Junie flinched, then reached back, silencing it. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to. You don't have to be sorry." Caldwell cut in too fast. He softened his voice. "Would you come somewhere warmer? Just for a bit." She hesitated, counted exits with her eyes, measured his tone. "For work?" she asked. "For dinner," he said. No strings. Her gaze flicked to the bundle of chimes, then back to him. "Can I pay?" she asked. He shook his head. "You already did." With what she almost asked but didn't. Junie stood, lifted her bundle, paused. Then carefully she untied one chime and slipped it into her pocket. Insurance. Proof. She nodded once. Okay. And for the first time, Caldwell realized he was the one holding his breath. The room was too quiet. Junie noticed it immediately, the absence of metal sounds, the way the air didn't rattle. The walls were clean. The floor didn't bite. The bed looked like it belonged to someone else. She placed her shoes neatly outside the door. Caldwell watched, confused. "You can keep them on." She shook her head. "It's okay." She sat on the edge of the bed and didn't move, didn't touch the blankets. Her bag stayed strapped across her chest like a seatbelt. "Bathroom's there," Caldwell said. "Hot water." Junie nodded, but didn't go. Minutes passed. He busied himself with tea he didn't drink. When he looked back, she was still sitting upright, hands folded, eyes alert. "You can lie down," he said gently. She tried. Her back barely touched the mattress before she sat up again, startled by the softness. She chose the floor instead, back against the bed, knees drawn tight. "I'm fine," she said quickly. He didn't argue. Later he brought her a plate. Soup bread. She stood to eat, taking small bites, chewing carefully. When she was halfway through, she stopped and wrapped the rest in a napkin. For later, she explained. "There will be more," he said. She smiled politely, didn't answer. That night, Caldwell heard a faint sound from the hallway. He opened the door to find Junie awake, sitting cross-legged, working by the light of her phone. She was making a chime. "Junie," he whispered, "you don't have to work." She kept tying. "If I work, I'm not staying for free." He sat on the floor across from her. "How long do you think this is?" She didn't look up. "Temporary." "How long do people usually keep?" "Me," she asked quietly enough to pretend it wasn't a question. Caldwell felt something fracture. "As long as you need," he said. She nodded, accepting the words without believing them. Before sleeping, she tied the chime to her bag, then tied the bag to her wrist, just in case. The purchase finalized faster than Caldwell expected. Papers signed, timeline set. The scrapyard was officially scheduled for clearance. Progress moved cleanly on paper, ruthless in reality. Junie heard the word demolition and went very still. That night she cleaned. Not messes, traces. She wiped the counter she'd barely used, folded the blanket she hadn't slept under, lined her few belongings in a row, deciding what mattered enough to carry. She wrote a note, small letters. "Careful. I didn't mean to cost you anything." She placed it beneath Caldwell's door, hesitated, then added one more line. "Thank you for the warm." Before dawn, she left. She didn't wake him, didn't take food, didn't take the bed's softness with her. She walked until the city smelled like oil again, until the ground crunched familiar underfoot. Back at the scrapyard, she found a corner that hadn't been cleared yet. She crawled beneath tin and pulled her coat tight. The wind came. She reached into her pocket and took out the unbroken chime, held it close. The sound was barely there, but it existed. At Caldwell's door, the hallway stirred. He opened it and found the note. His chest tightened. He ran. He found the room empty, the shoes still outside the door, the bag gone. On the handle of the door, swaying gently, was a single chime. It rang once when he touched it. Clear. Afraid. Alive. Caldwell grabbed his coat and keys. Outside, the city felt enormous and suddenly unforgivable. The scrapyard at night was a different animal. Headlights cut through the dark, slicing metal into sharp shadows. Caldwell's car slowed as the ground turned, uneven tires crunching over gravel and broken glass. He parked where the road ended and stepped out into the cold. The wind carried a sound, not loud, not steady, a chime. His chest tightened. He followed it between towers of scrap, calling her name only once. After that, he stayed quiet. Loud voices scared things away. He found her beneath a sheet of bent tin knees, drawn tight arms wrapped around herself like a habit. Her breath came out white. The chime was clutched in her fist, pressed to her chest, as if it could keep her warm. "Junie," he said, soft, but firm. "It's me." She flinched. Then she looked up, eyes wide, already apologizing. "I didn't take anything," she said quickly. "I left the note." "I know," Caldwell said, crouching down. His expensive coat sank into rust and snow. He didn't care. "Why did you leave?" She stared at the ground. "Because you were being nice," she answered honestly. "That's not a reason to go." "It is for me." The wind rattled the metal above them. Junie shifted closer to the wall of scrap, instinctively protecting the small space she'd claimed. "I don't stay where I cause trouble," she said. "Things end faster that way." Caldwell took off his coat and held it out. She hesitated, then shook her head. "You'll need it," she said. "You're not used to this." He draped it over her anyway. Her body stiffened, then slowly gave in to the warmth. She hated that part, the kneading. "You didn't cause trouble," he said. "You're a kid." She shrugged. "Kids get moved." A pair of headlights appeared at the edge of the yard. Another car. Then another. Caldwell recognized the logo on the door before the engine cut. Social Services. Junie saw it too. She stood instantly, stepping away from him, like contact might be contagious. Her hands tightened around the chime. "No," she whispered. Not angry, terrified. Caldwell rose to his feet. "She's with me." A woman stepped out, clipboard in hand, face professional but not unkind. "Mr. Rourke," she said, "we need to talk." Junie took one step back, then another. The scrapyard seemed to close in around them, metal-breathing wind humming low. And for the first time, Caldwell realized this wasn't just about saving her from the cold. It was about whether she would be taken at all. They didn't take Junie that night. But they didn't leave her alone either. Marla Keene sat across from Caldwell at his kitchen table, her clipboard balanced neatly on her knee. Junie sat on the floor by the doorway, back straight, hands folded, eyes down. "I'm not accusing you of anything," Marla said calmly. "But you don't have legal guardianship." "I'm aware," Caldwell replied. "And the child was found living in a hazardous area," she continued. "That requires evaluation." Junie flinched at the word hazardous. She shifted slightly farther from the table. Marla noticed. "Junie," she said gently, "do you have family we can contact?" Junie shook her head once. "Precise. Final. Have you stayed anywhere else recently?" Junie glanced at Caldwell. Just a glance, then back to the floor. "Temporarily," she said. Marla nodded, writing something down. "We'll need to schedule a hearing." The word hit Junie like a dropped plate. Hearing meant people. People meant decisions. Decisions meant leaving. That night, Junie cleaned again. She wiped surfaces she hadn't touched, folded towels that weren't hers. She lined her shoes perfectly by the door toes, straight laces tucked in. Caldwell watched from the hallway, unsure how to interrupt something so carefully constructed. "You can leave things," he said softly. She smiled without looking at him. "It's easier if I don't." Later he found her sitting on the bed, bag open, counting her items. "1," she murmured. "2. What are you doing?" he asked. "Making it lighter," she said. "In case." "In case of what?" She paused, looked up, her voice dropped. "In case I have to go fast." He sat beside her. "Junie, I won't let them just take you." She nodded. "People say that." The hearing date arrived sooner than expected. Marla explained the process. Temporary placement, review, evaluation. Junie listened politely, absorbing none of it. Her hands moved automatically, tying string around a new chime she'd been working on since the night in the yard. When Marla left, Junie placed the chime on the windowsill. "If I leave," she said, "this one stays." Caldwell frowned. "Why, so you don't forget what I sound like." The room felt suddenly too quiet. Junie began practicing leaving. She woke earlier than usual, packed her bag with the same care she used on her chimes, folded clothes small, lined her things in the order she'd need them. She didn't cry. Crying made you slow. She made breakfast and didn't eat it. Cleaned the pan. Left it drying just in case someone needed it after she was gone. Caldwell noticed everything. "You don't have to be ready," he said. "You can wait." She shook her head. "Waiting hurts more." That afternoon she asked to visit the scrapyard one last time. They stood at the fence watching machines idle. The place already felt hollow. Junie knelt and picked up a piece of wire, twisted it into a small loop. Did you know, she said quietly, that metal remembers where it was bent? Caldwell crouched beside her. I didn't. It always wants to go back, she said, even if you make it pretty. She tied the wire to her chime. That night, Junie wrote another note. I'm okay. You don't have to worry. She placed it neatly on the table. Then she hung the chime on the door handle again. Not as a goodbye, as proof she'd been there. She lay down on the floor instead of the bed, bag under her head, coat folded nearby. For the first time since arriving, she slept deeply. Too deeply. When Caldwell woke, the house was silent. The chime by the door was gone. Caldwell woke to a silence that felt wrong. The house was too neat, the air too still. He stood in the hallway and listened for the small sounds he had learned to expect: the scrape of wire, the soft click of metal, the careful breathing of a child trying not to take space. Nothing. He checked the guest room. The bed untouched, the floor bare, the bag gone. Then he saw the string. A thin length of twine lay coiled near the door, tied into the same knot Junie always used. Practical, secure, ready. His chest tightened. He moved fast after that. Kotke's phone. He ran the streets with the urgency of someone who finally understood what temporary meant. He checked corners. She might choose places with walls, with cover, with exits. He asked shop owners, vendors, anyone who might have noticed a small girl who walked quietly and carried little. Most shook their heads. At the market corner, a bread vendor hesitated. She was here, the man said. Didn't buy anything. Just stood a moment, like she was deciding where to disappear. The wind picked up. Metal sang somewhere distant. Caldwell drove toward the sound. The scrapyard gates were half-open machines asleep, like animals waiting for a command. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the rust with white. He parked and ran. He found her where the ground dipped, her old spot curled beneath tin, protecting something beneath her coat. Junie, he said. She didn't answer. He knelt, heart hammering. When she finally looked up, her eyes were tired but steady. She held a chime against her chest, fingers white around it. I didn't take anything, she said immediately. I left the note. I know, he said, breathless. Why did you leave? She glanced at the lights beyond the fence. They were coming, she said. It's easier if I'm already gone. He reached for her coat and stopped himself. You don't have to do this alone. She shook her head. I'm good at alone. Headlights swept the yard. Again. Junie stiffened. Please, she whispered, not to him but to the night. Please don't make it loud. A car door closed. Footsteps crunched. Caldwell stood between her and the approaching light. Marla Keene's voice carried calmly across the yard. Mr. Rourke, we need to proceed. Proceed. A word that didn't care how cold it was, or how small Junie had made herself. Marla stepped closer, clipboard hugged to her chest, eyes flicking once to the tin shelter. Junie, Marla said gently. You're not in trouble. Junie stood anyway. She placed the chime in her pocket and lifted her bag. Ready. Caldwell felt the moment slipping. She's with me, he said again, firmer now. She came back because she was scared. Marla nodded. And that matters. But we have protocols. Junie watched their mouths move, reading meaning from posture and pauses. She recognized the shape of this moment. Adults deciding. Her role was to make it easy. I can go, she said quietly. Caldwell turned to her. No. She met his eyes. It's okay. I know how. Marla intervened softly. Junie, there will be a hearing. You won't be alone. Junie smiled, polite, practiced. I'm used to waiting. They returned to the house together, but the air had changed. Paper followed them. Timelines, assessments, words that felt heavier than the cold. That night, Junie sat on the floor and worked on a new chime, her fingers precise, her breathing shallow. She tied knots and untied them, testing how fast they could be undone. Caldwell watched from the doorway. You can stop, he said. She didn't look up. If I stop, it's real. Later, Marla explained the steps. Temporary placement. Review. Child preference considered. Nothing promised. Junie listened without interrupting. When Marla asked if she had questions, Junie shook her head. After Marla left, Junie placed the chime on the windowsill. This one stays, she said. Why? Caldwell asked. So you remember the sound, she replied. In case I don't come back. The words were light. The meaning wasn't. Caldwell sat beside her. If it comes to it, he said, I'll be there. In the room, I won't leave. She nodded, accepting the promise without leaning on it. That night, she slept with her bag under her arm. She didn't tie it to her wrist this time. She left it loose. The night before, the hearing stretched long and thin. Caldwell paced the living room, rehearsing sentences that felt too large for the truth. Junie sat cross-legged on the rug, arranging her belongings in neat rows. Not packing pairing, she removed a scarf, folded it, set it aside. You can keep that, he said. She shook her head. Someone else might need it. She held the chime last, turned it once, twice. The sound was soft, steady. If they ask me, she said, what should I say? Say what you feel, he replied. She considered this. What if what I feel makes it harder? He knelt in front of her. Then it's still the truth. She nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. I don't want you to get in trouble, she said. Because of me. You won't, he said. And if I do, so be it. They sat in silence. Snow brushed the windows. The city hummed beyond the glass, indifferent. Junie stood and hung the chime on the door handle one more time. Not to leave it behind, just to hear it. The sound filled the room, clean, brave. She lay down on the floor, back against the couch. Can you stay until I sleep? She asked, almost too quiet to hear. He sat on the floor beside her. I'm here. Her breathing slowed. For the first time since he'd met her, she slept without flinching at every sound. Caldwell didn't move. In the morning, they dressed simply. No costumes, no defenses. At the courthouse steps, Junie paused. She reached into her pocket and placed the chime into Caldwell's hand. Can you hold it? She asked. Just in case my hands shake. He closed his fingers around it. I've got it. She nodded. Then she walked inside, small but unafraid. The doors closed behind them. The courtroom smelled like paper and old air. Junie noticed it before anything else, the way sound didn't travel far. The way even footsteps seemed to apologize for existing. The ceiling lights were too white. They erased shadows, made everything feel exposed. She walked in beside Caldwell, her steps small but steady. Rows of wooden benches stretched behind them, empty except for a few quiet figures. Marla Keene sat at a table near the front posture, straight, a file opened neatly in front of her. She didn't look cruel. She didn't look kind either. She looked prepared. Junie sat where she was told. Her feet didn't reach the floor. She folded her hands in her lap the way she always did when adults were deciding things. Her fingers searched for the familiar roughness of string. Not there. She glanced sideways. Caldwell caught it immediately. He opened his palm beneath the table just enough for her to see. The chime rested there, dull metal warmed by his skin. Junie breathed out. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The room shifted, became something official. Please be seated. The words landed like a door closing. Marla spoke first. Calm, clear. She explained the circumstances without embellishment: a child found living in unsafe conditions, temporary shelter provided by a private individual, no formal guardianship in place. Junie listened without blinking. She had heard these words before in other forms. Unsafe, temporary, not authorized. The judge nodded. And the child's current living situation. Marla hesitated only a fraction of a second. Stable, but unverified. Unverified felt heavier than unsafe. Caldwell stood when prompted. The sound of the chair scraping felt too loud. He spoke carefully, as if each word needed permission. "I'm asking for temporary guardianship," he said, "with the intent to adopt." A murmur rippled faintly through the room. Junie's shoulders tightened. Adopt was a big word. It sounded permanent. Permanence made people nervous. The judge studied Caldwell over the rim of her glasses. "Mr. Rourke, you are aware this process is not immediate." "Yes, and you have no prior relationship with the child." Caldwell swallowed. "I do now." Marla raised her eyes. "With respect, Your Honor, this relationship began under unusual circumstances. There is concern that Mr. Rourke's involvement, however well-meaning, may not be sustainable." Junie felt the word sustainable slide under her skin. She shifted in her seat, the bench cold through her coat. She told herself to be small, to be easy. The judge turned to Caldwell again. "Why do you want this responsibility?" The question hung in the air. Caldwell didn't answer immediately. Junie looked at him then. Really looked. His jaw was tight. His eyes were fixed on a point just beyond the judge's desk, like he was bracing himself against something unseen. "I didn't plan to," he said finally. "I didn't wake up one morning wanting to change my life." A pause. "I went to buy land." Junie's heart skipped. "And I found a child who was surviving where no child should have to survive," he continued. "A child who worked every night so she could eat every morning. A child who learned how to disappear because it was safer." Junie's fingers curled into her sleeves. Marla interjected gently. "Empathy alone does not equal suitability, I know," Caldwell said. His voice didn't rise. "That's why I'm here. To ask, not to take." The judge leaned back. "And if this court decides against you," Junie's breath caught. Caldwell answered without looking at her. "Then I will respect that decision." Junie felt something crack, not loudly, quietly, like a thread pulled too far. The judge nodded slowly. "We will hear from the child." The words landed hard. Junie froze. Marla turned slightly. "Junie, you don't have to speak if you don't want to." Junie knew that tone. It meant you can, but you shouldn't. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. Under the table, Caldwell shifted. He slid the chime from his palm into hers. Their fingers touched for half a second. Cold metal. Steady weight. Junie stood. The bench scraped softly behind her. Every eye in the room seemed too close, too sharp. She didn't step forward yet. She just stood there, small in the center of a very official space, holding something made from scrap. And for the first time since she'd entered that room, the courtroom felt like it was holding its breath with her. The courtroom waited. Junie stood still, the chime cold and heavy in her hands. She hadn't spoken yet. The room didn't rush her. It pressed in instead. White lights, polished wood, the quiet certainty that decisions were being made whether she spoke or not. The judge looked to Caldwell again. "Mr. Rourke," she said evenly, "before the court hears from the child, I need clarity." Caldwell rose. The chair scraped. He hated the sound. It felt like attention, like exposure. He placed his hands on the table, palms flat, grounding himself the way Junie did with string and knots. "You've spoken of empathy," the judge continued, "but this court requires more than feeling." "Why you?" Caldwell inhaled slowly. He didn't look at Junie. If he did, he might stop. "I've spent most of my life building things," he said. "Companies, systems, projects designed to last." He paused. The room remained silent. "I was very good at it." A few pens stilled. Marla's eyes lifted. "But I was never good at keeping people," he went on. "I learned early how to succeed without staying attached. It's efficient, clean." He swallowed. "And it leaves a lot of empty space." Junie's fingers tightened around the chime. The judge waited. She did not interrupt. "I lost my family years ago," Caldwell said. "Not all at once. Not dramatically, one by one. Through choices I thought were necessary." Through postponements, I told myself I'd fix later. His voice stayed steady, but something underneath it cracked like ice under weight. When I met Junie, she was living in a place meant for discarded things. She was surviving on what the world didn't want anymore. Marla shifted. Your Honor. The judge lifted a hand. Let him finish. Caldwell nodded in gratitude and continued. She didn't ask me for help, he said. She offered me something she made. Something beautiful. And she priced it so low, I realized she wasn't trying to profit. She was trying to stay. Junie's throat tightened. I didn't save her, Caldwell said. I didn't even try at first. I came to buy land. He exhaled. But then she asked me a question that changed everything. The judge leaned forward slightly. What question? Caldwell's gaze flicked to Junie for half a second, then back to the bench. She asked how long people usually keep her. A ripple passed through the room, not sound but weight. I didn't have an answer, he said, because I didn't want to make a promise I couldn't keep. Junie stared at the floor. She felt suddenly too visible, like her insides were being read aloud. I've been accused of acting out of impulse, Caldwell continued. But nothing about this has been impulsive. I've watched her prepare to leave every day. I've watched her sleep sitting up. I've watched her tie her belongings together so they wouldn't be left behind. His hands curled slightly on the table. She has taught herself how to disappear. Marla spoke carefully. And you believe you can undo that? Caldwell shook his head. Number 1. I believe I can stay while she decides whether she believes me. The judge considered him. And if she never does, then I will keep staying, Caldwell said. Because that's what adults should have done for her. The courtroom was very still now. Junie felt something unfamiliar heat behind her eyes. She blinked it away. Crying blurred things. Blurred things made mistakes. The judge turned to Marla. Ms. Keene. Marla stood. Your Honor, the concern remains. Mr. Rourke's resources are not in question. His intentions appear sincere. But guardianship requires stability, not rescue. Caldwell nodded once. I agree. Marla hesitated, then continued. Children with Junie's history often attach quickly. When circumstances change, the damage can be severe. Junie flinched at the word damage. She wrapped her fingers tighter around the chime, feeling the ridges she'd smoothed with her own hands. Caldwell responded quietly. That's why I'm not asking to be her hero. The judge raised an eyebrow. What are you asking to be? Caldwell didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was lower. Her home. The word settled differently than all the others. Home didn't mean ownership. It meant return. Marla closed her file slowly. If the court grants temporary guardianship, it will be conditional. Evaluations. Supervision. I accept, Caldwell said without hesitation. And if the child decides otherwise, he looked at Junie then. Really looked. Then I will help her pack, he said. And I will still be there when she needs me. Junie's breath stuttered. She hadn't expected that answer. The judge leaned back, studying both of them, the man who had learned too late and the child who had learned too early. Junie, the judge said gently, you've listened very patiently. Junie lifted her head. Her hands were shaking now. She didn't hide it. We're going to take a short recess, the judge continued. When we return, I'll ask you a question. You can answer it however you wish. Or not at all. Junie nodded. Once. As the judge rose, Caldwell sat slowly. He didn't look relieved. He looked emptied. Junie stepped closer to him. She didn't speak. She placed the chime back into his hand. For luck, she whispered. Caldwell closed his fingers around it, feeling the truth of what he'd just said settle into his bones. When the doors closed for recess, the room exhaled. And Junie realized something frightening and new. For the first time, the decision might include her. The courtroom came back to life in pieces. Chairs shifted. Papers slid softly across wood. The judge returned and took her seat, the weight of the bench settling like gravity itself. Everyone rose. Everyone sat. Junie remained standing. No one told her to, but no one stopped her either. The judge folded her hands. "Junie," she said gently, "I'm going to ask you one question. You can answer it in your own words, or you don't have to answer at all." Junie nodded. Her fingers were wrapped around the chime, now both hands cupped, as if it were something alive. The metal was cool, familiar. She could feel every place she'd sanded it smooth, every flaw she'd chosen to keep. The judge's voice was steady. "Where do you want to live?" The question didn't sound big. That made it worse. Junie swallowed. She looked at the floor first, at her shoes, clean borrowed, still not quite hers. Then she looked at the bench, at Marla, at the rows of empty seats. Finally, she looked at Caldwell. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He didn't promise. He just waited. Junie took a step forward. "I'm not good at talking," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "So I brought something." She lifted the chime. The metal caught the light, dull and uneven. Nothing about it looked expensive. Nothing about it looked official. A few people leaned forward without realizing they had. "I made this," Junie continued, "from things people threw away. I found them in the scrapyard. I worked at night so I wouldn't get in trouble." Her fingers tightened briefly, then relaxed. "When the wind goes through it," she said, "it makes a sound. Not loud. Just enough to know it's there." She turned the chime slightly. It rang. A soft, trembling note filled the courtroom. Not dramatic, not perfect, but unmistakably present. Junie flinched instinctively, then forced herself to keep going. "I learned that if I keep my things tied together," she said, "I can leave faster. I learned that if I don't take up much space, people don't notice me. And if people don't notice me, they don't send me away as often." A breath moved through the room. Not a sound. A feeling. Junie looked down at the chime again. "When I stay somewhere," she said, "I listen for sounds. If a place has sounds, it remembers you." Her voice wavered. She stopped, closed her eyes for half a second. Caldwell felt his chest tighten. He didn't move. Junie opened her eyes. "The scrapyard had sounds," she said. "Metal moving, wind, my chimes. It wasn't safe, but it didn't forget me." She lifted her head. "And his house." She paused, searching for the right word. "It answers back." Marla's pen stopped moving. Junie turned slightly toward Caldwell, now still speaking to the court. "When I couldn't sleep, the floor didn't yell at me. When I ate slow, no one told me to hurry. When I left, he didn't lock the door." Her hands shook. "So I came back," she said, "because I wanted to know what it sounded like if I stayed." Silence stretched. The judge didn't interrupt. Junie swallowed again. "I know I'm not easy," she added quickly. "I wake up early. I keep my bag ready. I don't know how long I'm allowed to be places." She hesitated, then added the truth she'd been holding back. "But when I'm there, I don't disappear." The words landed like something breaking open. Junie held the chime out in front of her, now arms extended slightly, as if offering proof. "When this rings," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I know where I am." She lowered her hands. "I want to live where this can ring." The courtroom was utterly still. No one cleared their throat. No one shifted in their seat. The judge's expression changed, not softened, not hardened, but deepened, as if something personal had surfaced. "Junie," she said quietly, "do you feel safe with Mr. Rourke?" Junie answered without hesitation. "Yes." "And if the court allows you to stay," the judge continued, "do you understand that there will be rules?" Junie nodded. "I'm good with rules. And if someday," the judge said carefully, "things change." Junie looked at Caldwell then, really looked at him. He met her gaze, steady and unguarded. She turned back to the judge. "Then I'll pack," she said. "But I won't think it's because I was bad." Caldwell's breath left him in a rush he couldn't stop. The judge closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice was firm again, but something warm had entered it. "Thank you, Junie." Junie nodded. She stepped back toward her seat, legs trembling now that the moment had passed. Caldwell stood halfway ready to catch her if she fell, but she made it on her own. The judge turned to Marla. "Ms. Keene," she said, "does the department have further questions?" Marla looked at Junie, then at Caldwell. She closed her file. "No, Your Honor." The judge turned back to the bench. "This court will issue a decision." Junie's heart hammered. She tucked the chime against her chest again, fingers curling protectively around it. Caldwell leaned toward her, his voice low. "You did great." She nodded, but didn't answer. She was listening. To the room. To the silence. To the sound that might come next. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't listening for when she would have to leave. She was listening for an answer. The decision did not come with drama. No gavel strike. No speech, just a quiet shift in the air. The judge folded the file, looked at Junie, then at Caldwell. "Temporary guardianship is granted," she said, "effective immediately, with conditions." The words landed softly and changed everything. Junie blinked once, then again. She waited for the rest, the warning, the catch, the moment where someone said, "But." It didn't come. "So?" Junie asked, her voice barely finding the room. "I don't have to leave today." The judge's expression gentled. "No, Junie, not today." Junie nodded. Just once, as if acknowledging a fact she'd written down. Caldwell exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. His shoulders sagged, not in relief, but in release, like something he'd been holding up, finally had a place to rest. Marla approached them afterward, her clipboard tucked away. "This is the beginning," she said. "Not the end." Junie looked up at her. "Beginnings are okay," she replied. "They sound different." Outside the courthouse steps glistened with thawing snow. The city hummed on, unchanged. Junie paused at the door. She looked back at the room one last time, the lights, the benches, the space where she'd stood and spoken without disappearing. Then she stepped into the cold. Caldwell offered his coat again. This time she took it without hesitation, slipped her arms into the sleeves and let it settle around her. They didn't hold hands. They walked side by side, and for the first time Junie didn't count exits. The scrapyard didn't vanish overnight. It transformed. Machines cleared danger, not memory. The metal that once cut hands was cleaned, sorted, softened. A new sign went up where the red notice had been torn down, "Ashwick Maker's Yard, from what's left we build." Junie stood at the gate helmet, a little too big, eyes wide. Dax Hollis waved from across the lot. "You ready, boss?" She smiled, small, shy, real. Inside, the new studio tables filled the space where shadows once lived. Tools hung neatly. Sunlight poured in through windows cut into old walls. Junie walked slowly, touching nothing at first. Then she picked up a wire, bent it, smiled. Kids arrived, quiet ones, loud ones, careful ones. Junie showed them how to sand edges, how to tie knots that didn't slip. She didn't lecture. She demonstrated. When the wind came, the chimes answered. Clear, bright, unafraid. Caldwell watched from the doorway. He didn't step in. He let the sound do the talking. Junie hung a chime above the entrance. It rang as people came and went. "It answers back," she said to Caldwell. He nodded. "It does." That night the house was quiet. Not empty. Quiet. Junie stood in her room holding her bag. She looked at the hook on the wall where she usually tied it before sleeping. She hesitated. The chime by the door moved with the breeze from the vent. A familiar sound, gentle, steady. Junie set the bag down, untied the strings, left it there. She climbed into bed and pulled the blanket up to her chin. The mattress didn't surprise her this time. The darkness didn't rush in. Caldwell passed the door once. He didn't stop. He trusted the quiet. Junie listened, to the house settling, to the chime breathing, to her own steady breath. She whispered, just to test it, "I'm staying." The words didn't vanish. She fell asleep without counting. Did this story move your soul? Share your feelings in the comments and rate it from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Click the end screen to watch another heartfelt video. See you in the next story.